Hello and welcome to a programme today which is all about the produce from the summer kitchen garden, because it's about this time of year when commercial and amateur growers alike are all busy reaping the harvests of all their hard labours in the earlier summer months. Well, one of my own favourite fruits of summer is this one here, the English tomato. And these tomatoes have just been picked from my neighbour's greenhouse, and as you can see, they're red and ripe, ready to eat, and the stalks are standing up proudly, which is always the sign of a fresh tomato. And if you've got some nice tomatoes and they're lovely and fresh like that, one of the best ways to serve them is in a salad. And this salad here is Italian in origin. It's got sliced tomatoes, slices of mozzarella cheese, basil leaves, and then crushed rock salt, freshly milled pepper, and a nice drizzle of virgin olive oil. And the colours are supposed to represent the Italian flag, so it all looks very pretty. Now, if your tomatoes are not quite so good, then a good way to serve them in a salad is to do a roasted tomato salad. And I'm going to show you how to do this now. You start off for 4 people as a first course with 12 large tomatoes, and you slice each one into 2 and put them onto an oiled baking sheet. But before you slice them, they need to be skinned. And if you don't know how to skin a tomato, the best way to do that is to put them in a bowl, pour boiling water over them, count 30 seconds, drain them, and then you'll find the skins will slip off easily. Now, when you've arranged the tomato halves on a baking sheet, you put a little bit of garlic into each tomato half. And what I've got here is 2 very fat cloves of New Season's garlic. They're always rather fat at this time of the year. And I've just chopped them, and I'm going to just put a little bit into each tomato half. And one of the problems with English tomatoes is that the commercial growers harvest the tomatoes when they're still green, because they have to go into vans and be delivered. And in transit, when they ripen off the stalk, they lose all their nice sort of fruitiness and flavour. But we are getting some nice tomatoes now. The supermarkets are beginning to get the message, and you'll see packets that say grown for flavour. It always amuses me. I like to buy them grown for flavour, but I always think it's very funny because I wonder what they were grown for before. But of course, what they were grown for is just to get lots and lots of tomatoes. Good croppers is what they were grown for, not for flavour. But as I say, things are improving. Now you can see I'm just putting a basil leaf on top of each tomato. And although they're going to go into the oven, I find that, in fact, roasted basil leaves also have a very good flavour. They turn crisp in the oven, and it's quite unusual and quite different. And then we'll put some fresh basil leaves on afterwards. Now we need some seasoning, some salt and freshly milled black pepper over the tomatoes, and then they're just going to have just a little drizzle of oil onto each tomato half. So just let the oil just drizzle over them. There's already some on the baking sheet, so they won't stick. Probably you'll find you need about 2 tablespoons of olive oil altogether. And they're going to go into a preheated oven, gas mark 6 or the equivalent, and they'll take about 50 minutes to an hour to become nice and toasted round the edges and the flavour all concentrated. And here it is with a balsamic vinegar dressing, garnished with some fresh basil leaves and black olives. This one here is the famous Middle Eastern salad called tabbouleh. It's made with cracked wheat, chopped salad vegetables and lots of freshly chopped mint. And this one here is a mixture of baby summer vegetables, and these are served with a warm lemon-flavoured vinaigrette and garnished with chopped chives. Well, if you were with me earlier in the series, you'll remember my little basil plants that I started out with. Well, they've now come to full maturity, and when they're ready like this to use, I always think it's time to make pesto sauce. I think each summer we should have 1 plate of spaghetti with pesto and 1 pesto rice salad. Well, now I want to show you how to make the salad, and you need for this salad if possible, some Italian arborio rice. This is the fat, round grains of rice, and this is the best quality Italian rice. And to that rice, I'm going to add, I've got some pesto ready-made here, and I'm just going to add 1/4 of the quantity of pesto to the rice, and just stir it round so that all the rice grains get coated with the pesto, and the oil in the sauce coats them nicely. And then what I'm going to do is put them into a frying pan, turn the heat up, and then add to the rice double its quantity. There was 8 ounces of rice there, and I'm now going to add 16 ounces of vegetable stock. So I'll pour the vegetable stock in. Just give it a good stir and add some salt. And then when it comes up to simmering point, you just, a bit of salt in first. When it comes up to simmering point, you then lower the heat, put the lid on, and leave it for about 20 minutes until all the rice has absorbed the liquid. And while that's happening, I want to show you how to make pesto sauce. Now, over here, I've got my basil leaves weighed out. There's actually 2 ounces of basil leaves there. And if you're not growing basil, don't worry, you can buy it in packets from the supermarket. You just pop the basil leaves into the goblet of a food processor. And then you add to that 6 tablespoons of nice fruity extra virgin olive oil. And then a fat clove of garlic, that goes in next. And then pine nuts. I've got 1 tablespoon of pine nuts here, they're going in. And behind the pine nuts, I've got a cheese called Pecorino Romano, which is becoming more available now. This is a sort of more robust, sharper version of Parmesan, and it's very good in pesto. But if you can't get it, don't worry, you can actually use Parmesan cheese. Now we're going to season that with some salt and then whiz it all up to a puree in the blender. And the lovely thing about making pesto is the way your kitchen is filled with the most incredible aroma of basil leaves. Right, now we'll switch on. This amount of pesto is enough actually to make a pasta dish for 2 people. Some people would say 3, but we're a bit greedy here, so we find this is enough for 2. And it'll be enough to make a rice pesto salad for 4 people. There we are. And this is our freshly made pesto sauce. Beautiful colour and beautiful texture. After 20 minutes, the rice has cooked and absorbed all the water. What you do is take the lid off, turn the heat out, and then just put a cloth over the top of the rice for a few minutes, just to absorb all the steam that will come out of it. And then the rice is ready to go into the salad. And what I'm going to do is actually dress the salad whilst the rice is still warm. What happens if you do this is that the grains of rice absorb the dressing of the salad much, much more easily if they're still warm while it goes on. Now the pesto's already in the bowl, and I've got a little extra dressing here, which is the juice of a lemon and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So that's going to go in as well. And then I'm just going to use a spoon and a fork now to just toss the rice grains into the pesto and the dressing. And remember that this is Italian arborio rice. It isn't a separate rice. It doesn't cook separately. It's a little bit more creamy in consistency than long grain rice. Although I have actually made this salad with long grain rice and it works quite well. Now at this stage you can actually serve the salad hot. It's excellent with fish. It's lovely with grilled fish, and it's very good also with chicken. Or you can leave it to cool and serve it as a salad along with other salads. Now I'm just going to put it into a serving bowl. And then I'm just going to garnish it. Spread it out a little bit in the serving bowl. It's quite nice to have a shallow dish which shows off the colour very well. Spread it out like that. And then for a garnish, I'm going to put 4 spring onions finely chopped. I'll just sprinkle those over the surface, like that. And then some flaked Parmesan cheese, just in very fine flakes like this, done with a potato peeler on the top, like that, just to give a little bit of extra cheese flavour. And then back to the basil bush and just get a few nice little basil leaves, just to make it look pretty as it goes to the table. There we are. Pesto rice salad. Well, while the crop of new potatoes is still in season, it's nice to make the most of them, so here's an idea. First of all, slice 2 pounds of potatoes quite thinly and arrange a layer in a gratin dish. Then add some seasoning of salt and pepper, sprinkle with a little chopped onion and some chopped garlic. After that, add a layer of peeled chopped tomatoes and season again. Next, add 1 or 2 basil leaves and continue this layering, finishing off with a little drizzle of olive oil. Bake at gas mark 5 for an hour or until the potatoes are tender and serve straight from the oven. And this is sliced potatoes baked with tomatoes and basil. Well, I think one of the neglected summer vegetables is this one here, which is bulb fennel. It's called finocchio in Italian, which I always think is quite a cute name. And I'm going to show you a recipe using fennel for roasted fennel niçoise. That's the title. First of all, I'm going to show you how to prepare it in case you're not familiar with it. You need to cut a little bit of the root end off first, just to trim it. But leave a little bit of the root end intact, and I'll show you why in a second. And then at the top you'll find it sort of goes in a little bit of a point, and the stalky bits you cut off, exaggerating the point with your knife like that, so you end up with a point. Now these little frondy bits here you need to pull off and save for a garnish later on. And then you cut the fennel bulb for this recipe into 8 pieces. So you go down the middle first, cut it in half, and then in half again, and then in half again, so that you've actually got 8 pieces altogether. Now, you'll see that in the centre there is a little bit of root. So just take a little bit of the root out. And why you needed a bit of the base was to sort of keep it all together. It's a beautifully arranged vegetable, this. It sort of fans out and looks very pretty. Now I'm just going to take the rest of the root bits out of the centre and tell you, if you haven't used fennel before, what it's like. It has the texture of celery, but it's got a lovely sort of aniseed flavour, which really is delicious. And it's served an awful lot in Italy as a vegetable, but not quite so much over here. So now we've got the root bits out. Now we're going to roast it, but before that, it needs to be just blanched a little. And to blanch it, you put it in boiling water with a little salt and just give it 5 minutes. And then you drain it in a colander, which I've done here. And then it's ready to be roasted. Now over here I've got an oiled roasting pan. And I'm just going to put the pieces of fennel onto the pan and then just arrange them like that. Put a little bit of salt and freshly milled pepper over them, and then just a little drizzle of oil, just on each one. Olive oil. And they're going to be roasted in an oven that's preheated to gas mark 5 or the equivalent, and it'll take about half an hour for the fennel to roast and become nice and brown and tinged at the edges. And we've got some in the oven that's just about up to that stage now, so I'll let you have a look. There we go. You'll see it's all nice and tinged brown at the edges here. And what it should be like is sort of cooked through, but still have a little bit of crunch and bite. Now, to make our fennel niçoise, we're going to do a niçoise dressing. And in my with my pestle and mortar here, I've crushed 1 fat clove of garlic and 1 heaped teaspoon of rock salt to a smooth paste. And to that, I'm going to add the juice of a really juicy lemon. And to that, to the lemon, and garlic, I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of a nice fruity extra virgin olive oil. And then I've got all my niçoise ingredients lined up here ready. 4 anchovy fillets, and these have been chopped quite small. 12 olives, pitted and chopped. And 1 shallot, 1 little pink shallot, and that's been very finely chopped, which gives a nice bit of crunch. Mix that in, and then finally 2 large tomatoes, and the tomatoes have been skinned, de-seeded, and again chopped quite small, as you can see there. I'll just give that a good mix together, and then we're going to transfer the fennel onto a serving plate and put the dressing on while it's still warm. So we'll just do that now. And this recipe is one of those recipes that you can actually serve warm as a vegetable or cold as a salad. Either way you're going to put the dressing on, it's good to put the dressing on while it's warm because it soaks in more easily if you do that. You can see how pretty the pieces look here, the way they sort of fan out, and the roasting gives them just that little bit of colour. Now, if you serve it warm, it's absolutely brilliant with fish. I think it's one of the nicest accompaniments to grilled fish. Or cold, you can serve it as a starter. Either way, it'll serve 4 people. Now I'm just going to pour the dressing over, and it's very juicy, the dressing, so however you're going to serve it, you need some nice crusty bread to go with it. And then as a garnish, remember the little fronds from the fennel bulb? Well, just scatter those over as a garnish before it goes to the table. And there we are. That's roasted fennel niçoise. When I hear the sound of the combine harvester, I know it's a cue that summer is drawing to a close and it's time to preserve a little bit of its sparkle for the winter months. Now, the British have always been very, very good at preserving pickles, jams and chutneys, and I've prepared several recipes for you, but I want to show you one first of all that's a little bit different, and that's spiced pickled runner beans. First, blanch 2 pounds of sliced runner beans in salted water for 5 minutes. In another pan, soften 1½ pounds of chopped onions with ½ a pint of malt vinegar. This will take about 20 minutes. When both are ready, drain the beans and add them to the onions. Now place 1½ ounces of corn flour into a small bowl and add 1 heaped tablespoon of mustard powder and a level tablespoon of turmeric. Now, with a little vinegar, mix this to a paste. Next, add this mixture to the other ingredients and simmer everything together for 10 minutes with another pint of malt vinegar. Have ready 1 pound of demerara sugar and ½ a pound of soft brown sugar and stir these in until the sugar is completely dissolved. Then simmer for a further 15 minutes. Pop the chutney in sterilised jars, seal and label them when cold and store for about a month before eating. Well, now I want to show you a recipe for homemade apricot preserve. And it's actually my mother's recipe, so I've got to make sure I get it absolutely right. You start off with 2 pounds of apricots. And I think it's better for those of you who perhaps haven't made a preserve before to start off with small amounts. You can increase them as you get more experience, but it's good to start with small amounts in the beginning. So just 2 pounds of apricots. You'll find towards the end of the summer, in August, you'll find that the price will come down and it'll be much less expensive to make. 2 pounds of apricots, which you start off the night before you want to make the preserve. You halve them, reserve the stones, keep the stones, and put the apricot halves into a preserving pan, and then you sprinkle them with 2 pounds of sugar, granulated sugar, so it's equal quantities. You can use preserving sugar, but it's more expensive and I don't think it makes very much difference. And because apricots are a little bit short in the ingredient that gives you a good set, which is pectin, you need a bit of extra pectin, so you add the juice of a lemon, a nice juicy lemon. And then you leave all that to soak overnight. Now, the reason you soak the fruit overnight is when you want to make a jam where you want nice chunks of fruit, you want to firm the fruit because it's got to go under very rigorous boiling to set. And if you don't firm it up, it can sort of smash about. And when you have your preserve on your croissants or your toast, it's nice to have nice pieces of fruit in it. This applies, by the way, especially to strawberries. So soak it overnight. Then when you're ready to make the preserve, you put the pan onto a medium heat. I'll just turn the heat on. And the next thing you have to do is dissolve the sugar. Now you can see it has melted quite a bit, but there's still quite a lot of sugar in there. And before we're going to bring it up to the boil to get a set, all that sugar has got to be dissolved and the liquid absolutely clear and free of any sugar. So what we're going to do now is leave that on a gentle heat for about 15 to 20 minutes until the sugar has dissolved. Now, after about 15 minutes, or it might take a little longer, what you should have is a liquid that's clear. And when you lift the spoon up, on the back of the spoon, you can just sort of test it to see that there are no little grains of sugar left. The reason the sugar has to dissolve is because the jam becomes sugary. If you've got crystals of sugar in there, then you get sugary jam. But that's fine now. So now what we need to do is hike the heat right up to its highest setting. And then we need to bring that up to a very rapid boil. And once it comes to a very rapid boil, you time it, and it'll probably take about 20 minutes. While you're waiting for it to set, it's important to stir it from time to time because the heat is very high and it might catch, which means scorch, on the base of the pan, and we don't want that to happen. Now, to test if you've got a set, you pick some up on the spoon and turn the spoon over like that. And when you see they begin to stretch and sometimes actually cling to the spoon, then you know you're getting near a set. So we'll give it a test now. And to do that, you need a plate that's been in the refrigerator. And then you just put a spoonful of the jam onto the plate, leave it to cool, and then take the preserve off the heat while you test for the set. Now that's our first test there, and the way to test it is to actually push it with your little finger like that and move it across, and what you're looking for is a really crinkly skin and a consistency of jelly, but we haven't got that, so that's not ready yet, so we'll just give it another little boil and then another test. Now, this is the second test, and you can see already that that's sitting much more proudly on the plate. And so we're just going to push it again and see if we've got that lovely crinkly skin on the top. Yes, we have. There's the jam, perfectly set. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is just put a tiny little bit of butter into the preserving pan, just a spot of butter, because sometimes you get a bit of scum on the jam, and if you put the butter in, that sort of disperses the scum a little bit. You're not to worry about the scum, it doesn't really matter, it often just settles down when you've potted the jam. And also, do you remember me telling you to save the stones? Well, you can crack about half of them, and then you'll find little kernels inside, and you blanch them, take the skins off, and put those into the jam, which gives a little bit of crunch, which makes a different kind of texture. Sometimes people like to put flaked almonds in. That's another idea as well. Now, if I'll just go over what we've done now. We boiled it for 15 minutes. We tested for a set. It wasn't quite set, so we put it back on the boil for another 5 minutes, and then the next test was a set, so that's 20 minutes altogether. Now we're just going to leave it for about 10 minutes to settle and then put it into the pots. Well, once the preserve has had time to settle, you need to put it into the jars. But I'd like to explain a bit about the jars. They need to be sterilised. Now, you need to wash them in warm soapy water, rinse them, dry them with a clean tea cloth, and then I like to put them into the oven, a medium oven, for about 5 minutes. A, to sterilise them, and B, because when you're pouring hot preserve into a jar, it mustn't be cold glass, because otherwise it'll shatter. So this going into the oven, just warm them through as well as sterilising them. Now, when you pour it into the jar, it's very useful if you've got this little piece of equipment here, very simple, but very, very useful, and that's a proper jam funnel. Now, what we're going to do is just put a couple of ladlefuls into the jar and make sure you get it right up to the neck of the jar. That's very important. And I haven't explained to you why you have to leave it to settle for 10 minutes. And that is, when you want pieces of fruit suspended in the preserve, it's very important to have that settling period, because otherwise what happens is the fruit all floats to the top. And it's a special problem when you're making strawberry preserve. It's awful when you have all the strawberries at the top and the rest underneath. So right up to the neck like that. And then we're going to put the lid on. But one important point I haven't mentioned, and that is that you need to have a damp cloth handy for any little drips to wipe them clean. Now, you can buy packets of jam pot covers that look like this, and you get a little kit. First thing you get is this, which is a waxed disc, and the wax on one side of the paper, when it hits the warm jam, melts and provides a nice seal. And then they give you a cellophane cover as well, which looks like this. That goes on top, and you also get little elastic bands to tie it down. Now, a lot of people say this is the best way to seal it, but I'm not absolutely convinced, because although it will keep perfectly well like that, when you come to use the preserve, you find it's awkward putting that back on again each time. So you can, if you collect different kinds of jam jars like I do, you can actually buy packets of lids like this that will fit various sizes, and I think probably that's the best bet in the long run. And now I've got to tell you one more thing, and that is, when you label it, make sure it's absolutely cold before you put the label on, because otherwise it'll fall off. The heat of the jam will destroy it. So that's apricot preserve. There are other preserves in the book and lots of notes on preserving. Well, we started off with rhubarb and gooseberries, and now we've cooked our way through summer. I hope some of this lovely summer sunshine has reached your kitchen as it has mine. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your summer. And I hope, like me, you've got a little something put by to brighten up any of those dull winter days. Bye-bye.